When did your gut feeling of something's not right here save you? There has been a few times where I hadn't listened to my gut, but one sticks out where I did. I used to live in a smaller Minnesotan town down near some train tracks and a bike running path that extends out of town into the woods. One evening I am sitting outside on my porch drinking a couple of beers with my buddy. Two dudes walk up on us kind of out of nowhere, and immediately something seemed off with them. It's a college town, and drunk people come up onto your porch a lot or randomly just say hello on their way to or from the bars downtown. But these dudes had a badass vibe to them. I had a little black Louisville Slugger lying next to me on the porch, so I grabbed and just held it across my lap. One dude asks us, "You guys got an extra smoke?" Buddy says nope. The other guy comes up real close almost onto the porch and says, "Did you see my face?" I just kept looking forward but not directly at him and just said, "Nah man, we didn't see anything." He said something like, "Good, lil punk ass," and they both walked away. 2 nights later I am sitting in my living room with the same buddy, and the local news is on. 2 guys arrested for robbing and stabbing a man a couple nights back on the trail down by the train tracks next to where I live. My buddy had looked at their faces coming up, and I had seen the dude clear as day that had asked for the smoke. It was those same fucking guys. I woke up at 3 a.m. once sitting upright in bed. I felt on alert and my heart raced when I saw that my cat was on alert too, wide awake by my feet with his ears perked up. But I didn't see or hear anything weird. Something didn't feel right and I couldn't relax. So I got up and went to the kitchen, turned on some lights and ate food even, though I wasn't that hungry. Eventually went back to bed. We discovered the next morning that someone had stopped while in the process of using some kind of tool to silently cut a big hole in the glass window in the living room. They were trying to break in, right next to the bedroom. I think the lights I turned on scared them away. Edited, to add that we had 3 long years of issues with our neighbors. They repeatedly came into our property, and were pissed that we put up a 9-foot fence to keep them out. This attempted break-in happened right after the fence went up and 2 days before they all moved out. Glad those pieces of shit are long gone. At age 5, I was almost abducted by strangers at the park who had a bunch of toys on a blanket and tried to lure me into their motor home. I looked back to my dad, who was talking to his friend maybe 100 yards away. I got a tummy ache when one of them tried to coax me by reaching for my arm to lead me away, and I screamed and ran like hell back to my dad. Years later, I found out those same people had abducted other kids who weren't so lucky. Never ignored a gut feeling since. Was riding my motorcycle with a friend on the back. We were going down a country road behind a truck hauling a bunch of old car tires when all of a sudden, I decided we shouldn't be there, so I slowed way down to let the truck go ahead of us. Just as I did, one of the tires fell off the truck and landed right where we would have been. Well, I was walking home. Wasn't late and I am from a pretty safe area, but it was that time of year when it starts to get dark really early, so felt kind of ominous. Anyway, I passed this guy in a red sweater and red tracksuit bottoms and he looks at me funny. Maybe he is high, maybe he is drunk. Either way, something not quite right about him. I keep going, look behind me, he is still there, cross the road, he crosses with me. As soon as I turn a corner, I sprint to my apartment complex and run into the coated gate and wait. He rocks up a minute later and stares at me through the gate. He just stares at me for a good 10 or so seconds, then runs back the way he came. Shivers. I am a firefighter. We got called out to a tree fire started by fallen power lines. We pull up in the truck, and I am trusting that my driver and crew leader are doing their job and have good situational awareness. We get out of the truck, and we have parked next to a set of power lines not fallen. It's a very windy night, and I can see the lines swinging, so I voice my concerns to my crew leader, who says it will be fine. We get out, hose out. Risk of the tree fire catching onto a house, outweighing potential risk of arson plus the line disconnected when it fell, and I am on the branch ready to start putting it out with 2 others. Near me when I get a chill. I look up, see the lines swinging violently, and yell, "Everyone fucking move," as the 3 of us sprint and dive out of the way. We hear a thwip and crack, and sure enough the line we were under came loose and stayed connected to the power pole. If I hadn't got that chill, chances are we would have had 3 fried fireys. Had a friend who said we should go to this party he was invited to by a classmate of his. We ended driving out to it. We noticed the neighborhood was not too pleasant and sketchy. We saw that house had some lights on in backyard, but kind of quiet for a party. I decided that we should not go since something felt really off. Friend ended finding the classmate that invited him got robbed and threatened when he went to party. It ended up being a fake party. I have told this story before, but I will tell it again. It's one of many, but this one stands out. I am about 7, my neighbors 8 and 9, and we are at a bus stop. Guy in stereotypical white van pulls up and asks if we have seen a dog. He doesn't describe the dog, and the truth is, dogs ran around in our neighborhood. My mother taught me stranger danger since as long as I can remember, so one of the boys at the stop, we will call him Paul. Paul describes a dog and man in van as like, "That's my dog. Why don't you get inside the van? We can all go look for him." Well, I had red flags going off at this point, and said, "No, I have to ask my mother," and as soon as those words left my mouth, he peeled out. It was only later that I realized I saved us all from child abduction, specifically Paul, who was walking toward the van to get in. Teach your kids what to do if this situation happens. Get the license plate, the guy's face, the car type, and what to do if something does happen. If I had known to snag his plates, we might have had a chance at catching him, but I only knew to say no. Another time I was speeding down a hill and thought, what if there's a deer around the corner? So I slowed down and sure enough, there were 3 deer in the road. Saved my own life by a rondo thought. Went to a college party and one of the guys made me feel very uncomfortable. He didn't ever do anything to me, but something seemed off. I kept dumping my shots because getting smashed seemed like a bad idea. I ended up taking a friend and leaving while he told us that we were being lame by not having more of the Grey Goose. He raped another girl at the party that night. I had a similar experience in college. I went to a frat party at another school and just got a really bad vibe. The guys had a separate bowl of punch for girls, which wasn't that unusual in itself, although maybe it should be, and I noticed some of the girls seemed off, way too drunk. So I helped them get out of there, warned the other girls at the party, and called campus security on the frat. It turned out that a bunch of girls were roofied at the party and had to be hospitalized. It all got swept under the rug, and there were no penalties for the fraternity as far as I know. Worked as a shot girl at a pub. One night I rejected someone who attempted to get my number. Not unusual, and he didn't seem that bothered. The whole exchange wasn't strange to me. In the early hours after the bar closed, I went to leave through the back door into the car park like usual, when I saw the sensor light outside was on. Someone was stood just outside the door. I felt uneasy, so went out the front and asked one of the bouncers to walk me round the back to my car. As we rounded the corner, we spotted this guy lurking outside the door holding his belt like a makeshift garrote. When he saw us, he started screaming that I was a fucking bitch and I should die. He scampered off into the road and never came back. A guy died. Blue came into the motel lobby at 1 a.m. In and of itself, not terribly unusual. Clubs get out. You see folks with body paint, foam, etc. But he just seemed off. When he came up to the counter, I took a step back, which is why his Bowie knife hit my thigh, and not my neck. Slammed the fire door down, called the cops. Wasn't difficult for them to find a bright blue guy who got naked for some reason after I slammed the door, running around in the snow at 1 a.m. Posted this before. Took my 2 babies to an in-home daycare run by a lovely woman. About 9 days in, the woman's teenage son was home when I picked up my kids. He gave me a super creepy vibe, pulled the kids from the daycare and placed them elsewhere. Maybe 10 years later, the kid murdered 2 people then killed his mom. When I was in middle school and around 14 years old, I was returning home. I live like 5 minutes away from said school, and I noticed there was a man following me. He was not looking at me, he was looking at his phone, and he wore a cap, so I wasn't able to see his face fully. Anyways, he gave off this weird vibe. I reached my apartment building and the guy was still behind me. I know mostly everyone who lives in my neighborhood, and I couldn't recall him. Last moment I decided I wasn't going to go inside the hallway. I turned around and went to a store where I waited for my mom to come. A few weeks after, there were some news about an 11-year-old girl from my school who was raped in the building right behind mine 2 days after the incident. The guy they caught looked a lot like the guy who had followed me, and given the time frame and the proximity, there's a high chance that it was him. First time was 3 weeks after getting my gallbladder out. I felt terrible. I still had a drain in my stomach. I called my sister and said, I am afraid I will be dead tomorrow. Went to the emergency room and turns out the surgeon had nicked my liver and I was bleeding internally. It turned into a blood blister on my liver, and if it popped I would have bled to death. Second time, I had been feeling like someone was squeezing around my chest for months. I passed out one morning, went to the hospital, and they found a tumor between my heart and lungs. Turned out to be cancer, a couple surgeries and chemo, and I have been in remission almost 5 years. Not me, but when my mom was a teenager on 18th November 1987, she was going to London to visit a friend. It was around 7:20 p.m. and she decided she was going to take a taxi instead of going by tube, because it didn't feel right. King's Cross Tube Station. 10 minutes later, the whole station caught on fire and 30 out of the 40 people died. If she had decided to take the tube, she would likely have died. Was hunting for early morals and King Bleats last May up near Kali Elam, no luck, so went further over towards Hancock. About 2-3 yards up a hillside, I felt like I was being watched. I slowly realized that I couldn't hear any animals making noise. Heckles raised. I immediately started down the most direct path to my car. One trail above where I was parked, I saw a partial juvenile male deer skeleton under a large conifer. As I double-timed it past, I looked up and saw the rest of the bones and sinew slung up in the branches. Out came the knife, and I slowed down, turning and scanning every few yards until I got into my car and booked it out of there. The next day, the mountain bikers were attacked by a cougar, and one was killed very near to the area I was hiking. I carry a handgun now for my mushroom hunts. Was at a farmer's market in downtown Chico, Sia, with my wife. I am tall and white and my wife is Asian and vertically challenged. And over the crowd I saw a very rough-looking gentleman, one really tall and the other short with a swastika tattooed on his forehead, like Charles Manson. Little-teded man, and I made eye contact from maybe 50 away and he gestured to his friend and then he pointed at me. I alerted my wife and told her that we were leaving immediately. She thought I was majorly overreacting and wanted to continue shopping, but I overruled her and we left. Maybe 6 months later we were watching America's Most Wanted and guess who showed up for double murder over meth in Oroville, Sia. My buddies, we still talk about that from time to time, and it still gives me goosebumps 15 years later. I was 6 years old and staying at a lodge with my family. My parents were staying in one room, and I was in the other room with my 3 siblings. Everyone else was asleep, but I was lying in bed wide awake and terrified. I don't remember hearing anything, just being scared shitless. I got out of bed and pounded on my parents' door so hard my fists hurt. I will never forget how scared I was. My parents had me and my siblings sleep in their room that night, and we left early the next day. I didn't find out till years later when I asked about it, that there had been a letter up against my window, and the screen was cut open. I live in Southern California, and growing up living by the beach, I would go surfing a lot. Almost every day during the summer with my buddies. One day I wanted to go but no one else could go, so I decided it was fine and I would go by myself. Not a huge deal, I have gone surfing alone in the past and there are always other people in the lineup to hang around. Anyway, I get to the beach and when I pedal out I noticed there wasn't anyone out yet. More waves for me, I thought, but after a while something just felt off. I don't really know how to explain it, but it was a very, very eerie feeling as if I was being watched. I don't think I have ever felt such an acute feeling like that before or since then, but I just listened to my gut feeling and paddled in and went home. The next morning a swimmer died at that exact beach from a great white shark attack. I haven't been surfing since and that was 10 years ago. This is a 1,000,000% true story about the time my addiction to cigarettes saved me life on 11 of September. I live in Pennsylvania, but used to work in Manhattan when I was 20 and still living at home with my folks. My older brother also worked in New York City and we usually took the same train to get up to the city. One fall morning, my brother had to go into the city early for a meeting, so I went with him to the station to catch the early train. This would have got me to my office pretty early, and since I was a junior help desk guy, I didn't have much I could do if I got to work early. And I would been up to the top of both the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty before, but never to the observation deck of the World Trade Center. So, I figured, why not take the early train, hop up with my brother to cross into Lower Manhattan, and go take in the view. I would be a little late to work, but no problem. The train pulls in and I just felt compelled to have a smoke. Like the single most important thing in the world was for me to just sit on a bench, light another cigarette, and let that train go. So I told my brother I would catch the next train and head straight to work. I would go to the World Trade Center another day, and that's what I did. I lit a cigarette. I waited for the next train, and got to New York City in the middle of the waking nightmare that was 11 of September. I smoke weed. One day I text my dealer. He takes a while to respond but eventually replies with, "Shit hot right now bro, but you can drop by real quick." I also asked for a half ounce, which is big jail time for possession where I live. So I am driving to his house and am about 10 minutes away when I suddenly just feel so nauseous and uneasy for some reason. I think about what he said and ultimately decide to just go home. That night on the news there is a report about a large meth bust that had occurred earlier in the day and that 6 people had been arrested. It was my dealer's house. I am still grateful to this day that I decided to turn around. Otherwise I would be in prison. Edit. I don't smoke anymore. I feel like you added the edit so you throw cops off your trail. Good one. I do not smoke weed, my fellow men. Thanks for watching. Share your story in the comment.